The Lincoln Center in New York City stood like a beacon of elegance, its glass facade catching the golden hues of a spring sunset on June 11, 2025. Inside, the Hope Rising Gala was in full swing, a glittering affair where crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over a sea of sequined gowns and tailored tuxedos. The event, held in the David Geffen Hall, was no ordinary fundraiser. With tickets priced at $1,000 a plate, it drew Hollywood stars, tech billionaires, and media moguls, all gathered to support mental health programs for homeless veterans, a cause that pulsed with urgency in a nation grappling with its duty to those who'd served. The red carpet, stretching 100 feet from the entrance to Columbus Avenue, buzzed with camera flashes and the hum of live X-streams as influencers and reporters clamored for sound bites from A-listers. Yet just beyond the spotlight, in a shadowed alley off 10th Avenue, a different story was about to unfold, one that would challenge the shallow judgments of privilege and shine a light on the quiet courage of an unlikely hero. Keanu Reeves stepped softly onto the uneven pavement of the service entrance, his scuffed work boots scraping against the asphalt. At 60, he carried the same unassuming grace that had endeared him to millions. Though tonight, he was far from the polished action star of the silver screen. His worn leather jacket, faded at the elbows, hung loosely over a plain black shirt, and his dark jeans bore the faint creases of a life lived without pretense. In his hand, he held a simple, creased invitation, its edges worn from being carried in his pocket for days. The paper bore no flourish, only a typed note signed by Prince William, a co-patron of the gala who'd crossed the Atlantic for this diplomatic and charitable occasion. Keanu's other hand brushed against a faded leather wristband tucked in his pocket, its surface etched with the initials TM, a memento from Tom Miller, a friend and fellow actor who'd lost his battle with mental health struggles a decade earlier. That wristband, more than any invitation, was why Keanu was here. It tethered him to the gala's cause, a reminder of the unseen scars carried by so many, including those who'd served in uniform. Keanu had always shunned the spotlight, a trait that set him apart in a city where fame was currency. His quiet philanthropy, donating millions to children's hospitals, cancer research, and veterans' causes, was legendary, though he never spoke of it. When Prince William's invitation arrived, Keanu accepted not for recognition, but because the gala's mission echoed his own to give voice to those society overlooked. He chose the service entrance, a narrow 30-foot alley, lined with catering vans and overflowing trash bins, to avoid the paparazzi swarming the red carpet. The air was cool, 50 degrees, with a faint breeze carrying the scent of diesel and distant city noise. As he approached the steel door, his boots crunched on gravel, and he glanced at the invitation one last time, as if to reassure himself he belonged. But belonging, he'd soon learn, was a privilege not everyone was willing to grant. At the entrance, Elise Harper, the gala's event planner, stood clipboard in hand, her crimson dress as sharp as her demeanor. A rising star in Manhattan's elite circles, Elise was obsessed with curating perfection, her every move calculated to cement her status among the city's glitterati. Her eyes, framed by meticulous eyeliner, narrowed as they landed on Keanu. To her, he was an anomaly, a man in a tattered jacket, with stubble dusting his jaw and no entourage to vouch for his worth. Her lips curled into a sneer. "Deliveries go to the loading dock," she snapped, her voice carrying the weight of someone who thrived on control. "This is a charity gala, not a free buffet." Keanu paused, his expression calm but not submissive. "I'm invited," he said, his voice low and measured, holding out the invitation. The paper trembled slightly in the breeze, but Elise didn't glance at it. Instead, she laughed, a sharp, cutting sound that drew the attention of nearby staff. "Invited, you?" she said, loud enough for a passing caterer to smirk. "This is for people who matter, not whatever you are." The word stung, But Keanu's face betrayed no anger. He'd faced judgment before, on movie sets, in tabloids, in the quiet moments when grief for friends like Tom weighed heavy. He slipped the wristband from his pocket, rubbing it between his fingers, grounding himself in its familiar texture. The conflict was poised to escalate, a spark waiting to ignite. Elise's dismissal wasn't just personal. It reflected a broader truth about the world beyond the gala's gilded walls. In a nation divided by wealth and status, appearances often trumped character, and social media amplified every misstep. Already, a young influencer, Mia Torres, lingered nearby, her phone angled to capture the exchange for her ex-followers. The hashtag #GearGalagate was moments away from trending, ready to broadcast Keanu's humiliation to millions. Yet, somewhere above, on a balcony overlooking the alley, Prince William stood, his gaze catching the scene below. The stage was set for a reckoning, one that would test Keanu's composure and challenge the crowd's complacency. This story, The Unseen Guest, is more than a tale of one man's ordeal. It's a mirror held up to America's ideals. Fairness, resilience, the belief that anyone can rise from obscurity to greatness. Keanu, with his weathered jacket and quiet dignity, embodies the underdog spirit that Americans cherish, from the small-town dreamers of Horatio Alger to the everyday heroes who serve without fanfare. The gala, with its clash of privilege and prejudice, reflects modern U.S. struggles, the class divides that pit Manhattan's elite against the working class, the social media scrutiny that can make or break reputations in an instant. As Keanu faces public humiliation, the narrative promises a redemption that feels both personal and universal. A reminder that true worth lies not in wealth or fame, but in the courage to stand tall when the world looks away. The tone is cinematic yet grounded, weaving vivid imagery, chandeliers casting 500 lumens, wine stains blooming like wounds, with emotional stakes that resonate deeply. Unlike the original tale of a royal gala, this story's U.S. setting and veteran-focused charity align with American cultural pride in military support and community action. The wristband, a humble relic of loss, replaces the original's royal seal, offering a symbol that's relatable and emotionally charged. By rooting the conflict in 2025's digital age, with X-posts and viral hashtags shaping the narrative, the story feels immediate. A snapshot of a nation wrestling with who it chooses to see and who it leaves in the shadows. As Keanu steps toward the gala's heart and Prince William prepares to intervene, The Unseen Guest invites readers to witness a moment where justice prevails, not through force, but through the quiet power of character. The alley off 10th Avenue, a narrow 30-foot stretch behind Lincoln Center, was a world away from the gala's glittering facade. Dim streetlights cast long shadows over catering vans parked haphazardly, their sides slick with condensation in the cool 50-degree air of a New York spring evening. The scent of roasted garlic from a nearby food prep area mingled with the faint tang of diesel, a gritty contrast to the perfume and champagne wafting from the red carpet 100 feet away. Keanu Reeves stood at the service entrance, his scuffed boots planted firmly on the cracked asphalt. In his hand, a creased invitation bore Prince William's signature, the ink slightly smudged but unmistakably authentic. The paper was his ticket to the Hope Rising Gala, a charity event for homeless veterans' mental health programs, but it was the faded leather wristband in his pocket, etched with TM for his late friend Tom Miller, that anchored his purpose. Keanu's eyes, framed by faint lines of age and experience, scanned the steel door ahead, unaware that his quiet arrival was about to ignite a storm. Elise Harper, the gala's event planner, stood just inside the alley's entrance, her crimson dress a stark splash of color against the drab surroundings. At 35, Elise was a force in Manhattan's elite circles, her meticulous planning earning her contracts with the city's richest and most famous. But beneath her polished exterior, Nails manicured, hair swept into a flawless updo, lurked an insecurity rooted in her new money upbringing, a childhood spent on the fringes of wealth she now desperately clung to. When her gaze landed on Keanu, his worn leather jacket and stubble triggered an instinctive disdain. To Elise, he was an intruder, a blemish on her carefully curated evening. "This isn't a homeless shelter," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the alley's hum. "Deliveries go to the loading dock, 50 feet that way." She pointed dismissively, her clipboard trembling slightly with irritation. Keanu's posture remained steady, his breath visible in the cool air. "I'm invited," he said softly, holding out the invitation. His voice carried the calm of someone who'd weathered worse storms: grief, loss, the relentless scrutiny of fame. He'd faced judgment before, but tonight he'd hoped for a quieter welcome. Elise didn't glance at the paper. Instead, she laughed, a brittle sound that echoed off the alley walls. "You? Invited to my gala," she said, loud enough for a nearby caterer to pause, tray in hand. "This is for A-listers, not whatever you are." Without waiting for a response, she snatched the invitation from Keanu's hand and tossed it into a trash can overflowing with coffee cups and food wrappers. The paper landed face up, Prince William's signature glinting briefly under a streetlight. Before Keanu could react, Elise waved over two security guards, their black uniforms blending into the shadows. "Get him out of here," she ordered, her voice rising with authority. The guards, each over 6 feet tall, grabbed Keanu's arms, their grip firm but not yet violent. As they pulled him toward the alley's exit, the shoulder of his leather jacket caught on a protruding nail, tearing a 3-inch gash. Keanu stumbled slightly, his boots slipping on a patch of spilled oil, but his eyes remained steady, fixed on the trash can where his invitation lay, discarded. In his mind, a memory flickered. Tom Miller's laugh, the weight of his friend's wristband in his hand, the promise to honor those who fought silent battles. He'd faced worse, Keanu thought. This was just noise. The commotion drew a crowd from the gala's main entrance, their designer heels clicking as they spilled into the alley. Actors, influencers, and donors, their faces flushed with champagne, formed a semicircle, phones raised to capture the spectacle. Mia Torres, a 25-year-old influencer with 1 million ex-followers, angled her phone for the best shot, her lips curling into a sneer. "Who let the bum in?" she said, her voice dripping with mockery as she typed the hashtag #ChnaGalagate. The post went live, racking up 10,000 views in seconds. A caterer, egged on by Elise's nod, stepped forward with a tray of red wine. "Oops," he said, tilting a glass to spill 8 ounces of Pinot Noir onto Keanu's shirt. The crimson stain bloomed across his chest, soaking through to his skin. Laughter erupted, sharp, mean, privileged. An actor in a velvet blazer chuckled. "He looks like he crawled out of a dumpster." Keanu's wristband slipped from his pocket during the scuffle, landing unnoticed on the asphalt near a catering van's tire. He reached for it instinctively, but a guard's grip tightened, pinning his arm. The crowd's jeers grew louder, their phones flashing like fireflies. Mia's live stream now had 50,000 viewers, with comments like, "Security's earning their pay," and "Kick him out," flooding the feed. Keanu's jaw tightened, not from anger, but from the weight of the moment. He thought of Tom, who'd felt invisible in his darkest days, and the veterans this gala was meant to honor. "I'm here for the veterans," he said, his voice soft but clear, cutting through the noise. Elise scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Sure you are," she said, turning to the guards. "Take him to the street before he ruins everything." The humiliation was complete, or so it seemed. Keanu stood, wine dripping from his shirt, his jacket torn, his wristband lost in the dirt. The crowd saw only a stranger, unworthy of their world. But Keanu's calm was unshaken, his eyes steady as he recalled Tom's words, "Keep going, no matter what." He'd endured loss, judgment, the relentless grind of a life in the public eye. This alley, with its jeering crowd and viral hashtags, was just another test. Yet the silence of the bystanders, their refusal to ask his name or question Elisa's cruelty, stung more than the wine. It was the silence of a society quick to judge, slow to see. High above, on a balcony overlooking the alley, Prince William stood, his navy suit blending into the shadows. His smartwatch buzzed with notifications, ex-posts, tagging the gala, clips of Keanu's ordeal spreading like wildfire. His jaw clenched, his usual diplomacy giving way to resolve. He knew Keanu's story, the millions donated anonymously, the friend lost to mental health struggles, the quiet heroism that defined him. As Elisa's voice echoed below, ordering Keanu's removal, William stepped toward the staircase. The stage was set for a reckoning, one that would turn this alley of shame into a moment of truth. The alley off 10th Avenue, a 30-foot stretch of grit and shadow behind Lincoln Center, pulsed with the tension of a gathering storm. Keanu Reeves stood pinned by two security guards, their hands gripping his torn leather jacket, the crimson stain of spilled wine seeping into his shirt. The crowd, actors, influencers, and gala donors, formed a semicircle, their phones flashing as they recorded the spectacle for X, where Johnny Galagate was climbing to 100,000 views. Elise Harper, the event planner, stood triumphant, her crimson dress catching the dim streetlight as she smirked at Keanu's humiliation. Mia Torres, the influencer, angled her phone for a better shot, her sneer unwavering. Keanu's wristband, etched with TM for his lost friend Tom Miller, lay forgotten on the asphalt, a silent testament to his purpose. His eyes, steady despite the chaos, held a quiet resolve, as if the jeers and wine were mere echoes of battles he'd already fought. But the tide was about to turn, and it began 20 feet above, where a figure stood on a glass balcony overlooking the alley. Prince William, dressed not in royal regalia, but in a tailored navy suit that blended into the New York night, watched the scene unfold. The cool 50-degree affair carried the crowd's laughter, sharp and cruel, to his ears. His smartwatch buzzed with X notifications, clips of Keanu's ordeal spreading like wildfire, each tagged with mocking captions. At 43, William carried the weight of diplomacy. But tonight, his role as co-patron of the Hope Rising Gala was personal. He knew Keanu's story, the millions donated anonymously to veterans' causes, the friend lost to mental health struggles, the quiet heroism that defined him. William's jaw tightened, his usual calm giving way to a resolve that burned brighter than the chandeliers inside. He stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking on the glass staircase as he descended, each step deliberate, like a drumbeat silencing the alley. The crowd's murmurs faltered as his presence registered, a ripple of recognition spreading. Then his voice, clear and commanding, cut through the noise. "Why are you shaming my guest?" Those 5 words landed like a thunderclap. The alley fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of a catering van's engine. Elise froze, her clipboard slipping slightly in her hands. Mia's phone lowered, her live stream stuttering. The guards loosened their grip on Keanu, their faces paling as they stepped back. Keanu, wine dripping from his shirt, turned his head slowly, meeting William's gaze. The crowd parted instinctively as William reached the alley floor, his 6'3" frame casting a long shadow. He bent down, retrieving Keanu's discarded invitation from the trash can, its edges damp, but Prince William's signature unmistakable. Holding it up, he faced the crowd, his voice steady, but laced with authority. "This man," he said, gesturing to Keanu, "is here at my invitation. He donated $50,000 to the veterans programs this gala supports, money that funded therapy for those you claim to honor." Gasps rippled through the crowd, a wave of shock replacing their earlier smugness. William's eyes, sharp, but not angry, locked onto Elise. You judged him for his clothes, his boots, his silence, he continued. But let me tell you who he really is. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. 5 years ago in Los Angeles, this man saved my friend's life. The crowd leaned in, the air thick with anticipation. William's voice softened, his memory vivid. I was on a low-profile visit. No press, no fanfare. A car accident on a studio lot trapped my security aide under a 200-pound steel beam. Panic everywhere, people running, except one man. Keanu, filming nearby, ran toward the danger. He lifted that beam, barehanded, and pulled my aide free. He didn't ask for thanks, didn't wait for cameras. He just walked away. The alley was a vacuum of sound, the crowd's phones now limp in their hands. Mia's face flushed, her fingers hovering over her phone as she stopped streaming. Elise stammered, her authority crumbling like ash. I didn't know, she managed. But William's raised hand silenced her. He turned to Keanu, his expression softening. I tracked him down years later to thank him, William said, addressing the crowd but speaking to Keanu. Not through agents or publicists, just a handwritten note which he answered himself. That's the man you're humiliating. The crowd shifted, some looking down, others whispering. A man in his 60s, a veteran donor wearing a Vietnam War pin on his lapel, stepped forward. His weathered hands began to clap, slow and deliberate. The sound grew, joined by others, until the alley echoed with applause. Not thunderous, but sincere. Among the onlookers, a young veteran named Jamal Carter, in a borrowed suit, spotted Keanu's wristband on the ground. He knelt, picking it up, its leather worn but warm in his hand. He approached Keanu, his voice steady but soft. You don't deserve this, he said, handing the wristband back. Keanu's fingers closed around it, his eyes meeting Jamal's with a quiet nod. The gesture, small but profound, cut through the crowd's shame, a spark of America's community spirit in a moment of division. Keanu straightened, the wine stain stark against his shirt, but his posture unshaken. He slipped the wristband onto his wrist, its TM etching a reminder of why he was here. For Tom, for the veterans, for those the world overlooked. The crowd's applause faltered, replaced by a hush of realization. Mia, her face now pale, deleted her ex-post, the Watcher Gallagate hashtag stalling as her followers pivoted to praise. Elise, her crimson dress no longer a shield, stepped back, her eyes darting to the ground. William turned to Keanu, his hand resting briefly on his shoulder. You don't belong in this alley, he said, his voice low but firm. You belong inside with us. The moment was a pivot, a crack in the facade of privilege. William's navy suit, devoid of royal pomp, made him relatable. A man standing not on title, but on principle. A stance Americans admired in their leaders. His story of Keanu's heroism, vivid and cinematic, painted a hero not in capes, but in scuffed boots, resonating with the U.S. love for underdog tales. Jamal's act of allyship, returning the wristband, added a layer of diversity and heart, reflecting America's multicultural strength. As William led Keanu toward the gala's entrance, the crowd parted, their phones now pocketed, their eyes fixed on a man they'd failed to see. The stage was set for a redemption that would rewrite the night. The alley off 10th Avenue, once a stage for humiliation, now stood hushed as Prince William led Keanu Reeves toward the glowing entrance of Lincoln Center's David Geffen Hall. The Hope Rising Gala, bathed in the warm light of 500 lumen chandeliers, awaited them, its red carpet stretching 100 feet beyond the glass doors. Keanu's torn leather jacket, still damp with an 8-ounce stain of Pinot Noir, hung heavy on his shoulders. But his wristband, returned by a young veteran named Jamal Carter, glinted softly on his wrist etched with TM for his late friend, Tom Miller. The crowd, moments ago a jeering mob of actors, influencers, and donors, parted silently, their phones pocketed, their eyes averted. Elise Harper, the event planner, lingered at the alley's edge, her crimson dress, no longer a shield for her crumbling authority. Mia Torres, the influencer whose John Gallagate post had fueled the frenzy, stood frozen, her face flushed with shame. As William's navy suit caught the light, his resolve unshaken, the night pivoted toward redemption. A moment that would redefine not just Keanu, but everyone who'd witnessed his ordeal. William paused at the gala's entrance, turning to an aide who handed him a fresh charcoal jacket, its fabric crisp and tailored. He offered it to Keanu, his voice low but insistent. "This is where you belong," he said, gesturing toward the head table, 50 feet across the marble-floored ballroom. Keanu hesitated, his fingers brushing the wristband, then nodded, slipping off the stained coat and donning it. The gesture was simple but profound, a shedding of the alley's scorn. William led him inside, the crowd's hush deepening as they reached the table's center, framed by velvet curtains and a stage where the gala's mission, mental health for homeless veterans, glowed in gold letters. William faced the audience, his 6'3" frame commanding without pomp. "Keanu's worth," he declared, "isn't in his fame or his clothes. It's in his actions. In America, that's what builds legacy." The words landed like a challenge to the 350 guests, their faces a tapestry of guilt and awe. William's gaze shifted to Elise, who stood near the stage, her clipboard now a useless prop. "You led this," he said, his tone sharp but measured. "You judged a man who donated $50,000 to this cause, who saved my friend's life. Apologize publicly, or he leave." Elise's eyes widened, her manicured hands trembling. The crowd murmured, sensing a reckoning. William then turned back to Keanu, his expression softening. "This man deserves to be seen," he said, inviting Keanu to speak. Keanu stepped forward, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "I'm here for those who feel unseen," he said, his words soft but clear, echoing through the ballroom's acoustics. "Like my friend was, like the ones that are fighting their fights. Let's make sure they're heard." His humility, rooted in the memory of Tom Miller's struggle, struck a chord. The crowd leaned in, their earlier jeers forgotten. A veteran donor, his Vietnam War pin glinting, nodded solemnly. Keanu's brief speech, devoid of vengeance, embodied the self-reliance and purpose Americans admired, a stark contrast to the alley's chaos. His wristband, now visible, became a silent symbol of his resolve. Elise, her face pale, stepped onto the stage, her heels clicking in the silence. I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice breaking. "I was afraid of being lesser, of not belonging. I judged you wrong, Keanu." The admission, raw and unscripted, laid bare her insecurity, her new money roots fueling her need to gatekeep. William nodded, his judgment tempered with mercy. "Words aren't enough," he said. "You'll work with the charity's outreach team, starting tomorrow, to learn what this cause means." Elise swallowed, nodding shakily, her penance a nod to American ideals of redemption through effort. The crowd exhaled, sensing justice not in punishment, but in growth. The room stirred, transformed by the moment. Jamal Carter, the young veteran who'd returned Keanu's wristband, approached, extending a handshake. "You're one of us," he said, his voice steady, his borrowed suit creased but proud. Keanu gripped his hand, a quiet acknowledgement of their shared cause. Mia Torres, her influencer facade shattered, tapped her phone, deleting her Darn Gallagate post. Its 200,000 views, now a ghost. "I was wrong," she whispered, her eyes meeting Keanu's briefly, before she stepped back. Other guests followed, donors pledging donations, an actress offering a scarf to dab the lingering wine stain. The gala's donation counter, projected on a screen, surged by $500,000 that night, fueled by Keanu's story and the crowd's newfound conviction. The climax came as William reached into his pocket, producing a small veterans charity pin, its silver edge catching the chandelier's light. He pinned it to Keanu's new jacket, his fingers steady. "This is yours," he said, his voice low but resonant. The pin, a modest circle engraved with a dove, symbolized Keanu's validated worth, tying the night's arc together. The crowd gasped softly, the gesture resonating with Americans' love for symbolic acts. Like a medal pinned on a soldier or a key handed to a new homeowner. Keanu touched the pin, his fingers lingering on its cool surface, his wristband brushing against it. He nodded to William, a silent thank you that needed no words. The room erupted in applause, not the tentative claps of the alley, but a thunderous wave that made the chandeliers tremble faintly. Guests rose, their faces a mix of shame and inspiration. An exec in a tuxedo pledged to match Keanu's donation. A young couple, moved by his speech, vowed to volunteer. The transformation was collective, a microcosm of America's strength, communities rallying when shown the way. Elise, now offstage, watched quietly, her clipboard discarded, a flicker of purpose replacing her earlier fear. William raised a hand, quieting the applause. "This night isn't about us," he said, gesturing to Keanu. "It's about those we serve. Let's honor them with action, not just applause." His words, stripped of royal pretense, aligned with American skepticism of hierarchy, grounding his authority in shared values. He stepped back, letting Keanu stand alone under the chandeliers, the pin and wristband glinting together. A man no longer unseen. The orchestra resumed, its strings swelling with a hopeful melody, as guests returned to their seats, their conversations now tinged with resolve. Keanu's redemption was complete, not through vengeance but through the quiet power of his character, a legacy forged in actions, not titles. The David Geffen Hall at Lincoln Center shimmered under the glow of 500-lumen chandeliers, their light casting a golden halo over the Hope Rising Gala on June 11, 2025. The ballroom, once a stage for division, now pulsed with unity as 350 guests rose to their feet, their applause a thunderous wave that echoed off marble walls. At the head table, Keanu Reeves stood beside Prince William, his fresh charcoal jacket adorned with a silver veterans charity pin, a quiet emblem of his validated worth. On his wrist, the faded leather wristband, etched with TM for his late friend Tom Miller, glinted softly, a symbol of the unseen struggles he'd carried into this night. William, his navy suit a testament to principled authority, raised a glass of sparkling water, his voice cutting through the ovation. "To the unseen heroes," he declared, "those who act without asking for applause." The toast was not just for Keanu, but for the veterans the gala served, for every quiet soul who'd been overlooked. The room erupted anew, clapping not only for the man in scuffed boots, but for a cause that had found its heart. Keanu's gaze swept the crowd, his eyes steady but humble. He touched the wristband, a gesture grounding him in Tom's memory and the mission that had brought him here. The applause, swelling like a symphony, carried a weight beyond the moment. It was America's spirit, rallying around those who give without seeking glory. William's toast sealed the night's redemption, a pivot from the alley's shame to the ballroom's hope. As the orchestra resumed, its strings weaving a melody of renewal, a candid moment unfolded. Keanu and William shared a quiet laugh, their heads bowed over a private joke. The chandelier's glow framing them like a scene from a film. An aide's phone captured it, unstaged, unfiltered, and within minutes, the photo was posted to X with the caption, "This man gave without asking." Unseen heroes. By midnight, it had 2 million views, sparking a movement that would ripple across the nation. The viral impact was immediate, a testament to America's love for stories that uplift and unite. By morning, Unseen Heroes trended on X, with Americans sharing tales of local heroes, a teacher in Chicago who funded classroom supplies from her own pocket, a nurse in Houston who worked double shifts during a hurricane, a veteran in Montana who built shelters for the homeless. The movement tapped into U.S. optimism, a belief that ordinary people could spark extraordinary change. The gala's charity, inspired by Keanu's story, adopted a policy to honor anonymous donors, naming an annual award after the unseen heroes, who gave without fanfare. Donations surged, with $1 million raised in the week following, enough to fund therapy for 500 veterans. Keanu's quiet courage had reshaped how a nation saw its nobodies, proving that true power lies not in fame or wealth, but in the resolve to act when no one's watching. Elise Harper, the event planner whose prejudice had ignited the conflict, stood transformed. Her crimson dress now felt like a relic of her former self, her clipboard long discarded. After her public apology, she committed to volunteering with the charity's outreach team, visiting shelters to listen to veterans' stories. The work, humbling and raw, gave her a purpose she'd never found in Manhattan's elite circles. Her journey, from insecurity to service, mirrored America's ideal of redemption through effort. A second chance earned, not given. Mia Torres, the influencer who'd fueled Arsh Galagate, posted a new X thread, sharing Keanu's story and urging her million followers to donate. Her pivot, small but sincere, reflected a broader shift, a generation learning to see beyond appearances. Jamal Carter, the young veteran who'd returned Keanu's wristband, left the gala with a renewed sense of pride, later joining the charity's board to advocate for his peers. As the gala wound down, Keanu slipped away, his exit as unassuming as his arrival. He stepped into the New York night, the air now a brisk 45 degrees. The city's skyline, a mosaic of lights stretching 10 miles into the distance. Under a streetlight on 65th Street, he paused, the wristband catching the silver glow. His phone buzzed with a text from William. "Thank you for showing us." Keanu smiled faintly, pocketing the device, and kept walking, his boots scuffing softly on the sidewalk. The final image, a solitary figure fading into the city's embrace, was cinematic, a hopeful close that lingered like the last frame of a classic film. It captured Keanu's essence, a man who never sought the spotlight, but left it brighter for others. The story of the unseen guest offers profound lessons for us all. First, it reminds us that character outweighs credentials. Keanu's actions, not his fame, defined his worth, a truth America cherishes in its underdog tales. Second, it teaches the power of allyship, as seen in Jamal's small act and William's bold stand, showing that change begins when we lift others up. Third, it warns against the rush to judge, a trap amplified by social media's glare, urging us to pause and see the person beneath the surface. Finally, it celebrates quiet courage, the kind that thrives in shadows and transforms lives without fanfare. These lessons, woven into the night's arc, uplift and unite, echoing America's strength. A nation thrives when it sees the unseen. To you, our audience, thank you for joining us on this journey. Your support, your likes, shares, and comments on X fuel stories like Keanu's, shining a light on heroes who might otherwise go unnoticed. We're grateful for your belief in narratives that inspire change, that remind us of what's possible when we choose empathy over ego. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button on our channel to stay with us for more tales of courage and redemption. Together, let's keep the Near Unseen Heroes movement alive, honoring those who give without asking. Keanu's night at Lincoln Center wasn't just a moment. It was a mirror, reflecting the best of who we can be. As he walked into the New York night, wristband glinting, he left us a challenge to see, to act, to make the unseen unforgettable.